And we're back, and it's time to continue our episode on getting started in 40K. As we left off in part one, we had just looked at the things to consider when picking an army. So now we assume you have picked an army from one of the 18 to 20 factions of the game, and you've kind of decided that I like the aesthetics, I like the look of it, I kind of know what I want to do with it. So where do I get started? So there's several ways to approach buying an army. I'm going to kind of start off with some of the bundled options to where you can buy a bunch of stuff at once. The first one of those is Combat Patrol. Combat Patrols are available for most of the armies. Some of them are temporarily out of stock. Some of them have been rotated out over time, but usually they are replaced by other armies. There are 27 Combat Patrols currently available. Plus, the Combat Patrol starter set is listed in that listing for an even 28, although the Combat Patrols that appear in those are also, well, one of them is available as a standalone. The other one has been replaced with a different Combat Patrol. So we mentioned the price on Combat Patrols in part one was $170. And one of the oddities of Combat Patrols in the past was that they were made for a previous edition of the game, and they were not always balanced. But when 10th edition came out, they tried to balance them by creating a play version that used just the models in a particular Combat Patrol and kind of tweak the rules on them so you could build that exactly as presented, play it, there's your starting army.
Yeah.
And over time, they have tweaked the contents of those to get away from having a lot of the older ones would have like a big centerpiece model, like a monster or big vehicle or something, and then would kind of build some infantry around that, and that would be your list. And the issue was that not everybody had a big monster or vehicle, or not everybody's units were built to deal with the big monster or vehicle. And so over time, they've switched out the Combat Patrols to be more infantry focused. In fact, almost all of them, there are a couple from time to time that will still have a vehicle or a monster, but most of them are going to lean very heavily into infantry. Now, there's a couple of upsides and downsides to Combat Patrols. One of them is Combat Patrol is its own format of the game. And if you buy a Combat Patrol, you assemble it exactly as it appears.
Mm-hmm.
You now have a playable army for a particular style of 40K. You do not have to worry about points for army building. You do not have to worry about making war gear choices, like picking like this model could have this weapon or could have that weapon. Which one do I pick? Well, the Combat Patrol kind of picks that for you. And all the rules for Combat Patrol, the missions and the rules for the Combat Patrols themselves are available online for free. So this is a very decent, you're like, why didn't you say it's a good starting point? It's a decent starting point. Again, not all Combat Patrols are created equal, and not all armies have equal access to Combat Patrols. One of the reasons I say that is you have Space Marines. We've talked about Space Marines already several times, and I mentioned there were several flavors of Space Marines. Depending on what flavor of Space Marine you like, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7 different Combat Patrols that all represent different flavors of Space Marine. Most armies only have 1.
Yeah.
Imperial Guard's one of the weird ones that has 2. And so not like you have a lot more options if you're wanting to build Space Marines. And in fact, I believe there might be a couple that aren't even listed on, might be not listed on the website, or that are coming out soon.
I think they're all out. I think they may just be at the bottom, like a sold out. Yeah, the Iron Hands one isn't on here.
Yeah, so there's actually more.
Guard. Yeah, so there's actually 9.
No, Raven Guard is on there. White Scars is not listed. So
White
a
Scars,
couple
sorry.
that are not listed. I think they were sold out online. They made like a limited number of them. And I know the White Scars one was limited because it was already sold out last episode when we were talking about holiday bundles. So I wonder if the Iron Hands one is the same way.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. So again, if that was the flavor you were going for, there might not be a Combat Patrol available for it. You may have to kind of look and like squint a bit and find the one that it kind of fits, but not exactly. Usually you get a decent savings on the models that are in there, but you may not like the models that are in there. So for example, if we look at the combat patrols for Imperial Guard, we've been mentioning that a few times. So I mentioned there are two. There's the Astra Militarum one, which is like the generic, and there's the Death Corps of Krieg one. Now, like the Death Corps Krieg one has infantry, it has some cavalry, and has some heavy weapon squads, and those are all really good for Death Corps. For the Guard one, it has similar infantry, but it has a lot more cavalry. It's got like 10 guys on horses. And if that's not the vibe of Guard you want to run,
Yeah.
like those 10 guys on horses may not do anything for you. So they may not be a good choice. If you want to run generic Space Marines, but you want more guys who are close combat focused, well, you could buy the Blood Angels one, but then you're going to have 6 of their special like elite unit, the Sanguinary Guard, which you may not want to play Blood Angels exactly. So that might not be one you want to get. So be aware of that not all of these are going to fit the style you want. Let's say you like Sisters of Battle, the Adeptus Sororitas, who are basically space nuns with guns. Theirs has a bunch of what they call arcoflagellants, which are people who have been punished for their crimes by having their like arms cut off and replaced with whips, and have like the anger centers in their brain wired into so they can be thrown at the enemy to run wildly at them and then die fighting. That may not be the style of Sisters you want to play. You may want to play something that is more gun based. So yeah, maybe this isn't the right buy for you. The other thing about combat patrols is that the game mode of combat patrol is limited.
Yeah.
I have heard so many people talk about, and we'll get into this in learning to play, but you probably won't stick with playing just your combat patrol for long. It's not a bad starting point, but it's not going to be the end all be all of buying your army. But depending on what models are in there, if the models that are in there fit what you want to do, then go ahead and get it. But if it doesn't, don't feel like that's your only option.
Yeah.
Another option, we just talked about several of these last episode, and as of recording date, they are not out yet. So these will be something that'll be available over the next month or so. And if you want to get them, they might sell out pretty quickly, is the holiday bundle. There will be 7 holiday bundles for 40K coming out this year. If you listen to our last episode, we're catching up with 40K updates. We talk about all 7 of them, plus a couple of other releases that are related. And those are usually a very good value for the price. You're usually saving at least $60, sometimes more, sometimes as much as $100. Like you're often saving like a third of the price of buying the kits individually. They are very good. Also, the last couple of years, they've done a very good job of designing the bundles so that if you combine it with the combat patrol, you actually get a pretty well-rounded army. And in fact, we have mentioned like, hey, if you buy this bundle in the combat patrol, you are very well on your way to building a 1,000-point army. So they are good if you can get them. They are not evergreen products. Combat patrols are generally evergreen. They will rotate some of them out as they've changed up the design of combat patrol over time, but they tend to be always available. Holiday bundles are not. They are available once. Stores will sometimes have some left over from a previous year if that particular kind didn't sell well, but they tend to sell pretty quickly. But if you can get your hands on one for one of the armies you like, and that's the other thing, is not all armies get holiday bundles. There's a lot of them that don't, and sometimes the holiday bundles themselves aren't good. If you wanted to play Tau, we did not like the holiday bundle. We did not think it combined well with the combat patrol, so it wasn't a good starting point. But often they are. Often they are good starting points. There is also a related product called like the Army Launch Box, which is, hey, a new army comes out, or we've released a new line of models for an army. We've done a revamp on their design, whatever. We're going to release a set of a bunch of models together tied to that army. Those are cool when they happen. They're often a very good spot for starting out with an army. Now that all the codexes are out, we are not likely to see them until after the next edition, which again will probably be in the summer. There have been some exceptions. They just updated a bunch of Space Marine Terminators, which are Space Marines in like really bulky killer armor. To celebrate that, they released a bundle that was like oops all Terminators. It was like 18 Terminators, 3 characters and 15 troops. And it was actually a pretty good value. And if you wanted to play Terminators or play Space Marines, it was a good buy. And we felt it dovetailed well with a couple of the different combat patrols. So that one would be a good one to buy. I think it is sold out now, but you keep an eye out for those. Also check to see if stores might still have some, because stores often will order to order, but sometimes they will order extras on the hope of selling some later. Also, you can always check to see if any of your local friendly game stores has it. Sometimes you can check to see if any retailers on Amazon have it. Although I have heard horror stories of people buying Amazon models and having a few of the key models removed because they're not sold by Amazon. They're just shipped by Amazon. They're sold by somebody else. So be aware of that. If you can't find what you're looking for in a combat patrol or a bundle, you are probably going to have to buy retail kits. I will say, if you can, buy local whenever possible. Buy where you want to play, because stores depend on that income. Stores depend on people spending money at their shops to keep the lights on and keep the doors open. And if that's the place you're going to play, it would behoove you to spend some money there.
For sure.
Also, one thing that friendly local game stores, independent stockists can do that Games Workshop can't is offer discounts. Now, one of the reasons Games Workshop can't offer discounts is tied into, I think it's specifically EU law about being, even though Games Workshop is a British company, which is not part of the EU anymore, but still, it's like they're both the manufacturer and the retailer. They can't offer a discount without running afoul of some fair trade laws. So when they offer discounts, it's in the form of a bundle. A combat patrol or a holiday bundle is their form of offering a discount. Whereas local stores can often offer discounts. Usually 10% off the cost of GW kits is not unusual. So if you can buy from your local stores whenever you can, that's great. I do know there are online vendors who will offer similar discounts. Sometimes you can find something really good. I know I just gave a warning about Amazon, but there are definitely times you can buy kits off of Amazon for a decent discount. I would save that as if you absolutely have to have it new and you absolutely cannot get it from a local store, that's an option. But always buy local when you can. But also be aware, there are a lot of kits that cannot be found on store shelves, not even at a Games Workshop store. Yeah, Games Workshop only has so much shelf space, so they will have models that are basically online only. And you can find them, if you go to their site, warhammer.com, which is their store, and you want to try to find, I'm going to look for, Ultramarines are always good. There's lots of Ultramarines. They have 10 online only models. So did you want to buy the Vanguard Task Force? That's online only. Did you want to buy a lieutenant with a storm shield? That's online only. Did you want to buy Combat Patrol Space Marines? Sorry, online only. You cannot go into a store and just pull one off the shelf. Most stores will order them for you. Your local store can place orders with Games Workshop for you. Games Workshop stores obviously can buy stuff from the mother company and have it shipped directly to the store or have it shipped to you. So those are both options. But just know, hey, if I really want to go get this set and I want to get it off the shelves, you can't on everything. And even if you go into a Games Workshop store, they will have a shelf usually in the back, last time available of products yep, this is the last time we're going to carry this on the shelves. You'll have to order it directly if you want to get it. So be aware of that. Something else you had mentioned, Kevin, I didn't have on my notes, but I probably should have, is yes, 3D printed is an option.
Yes. 3D printing is definitely becoming a lot more affordable, a lot easier. You can buy your own machines and print them yourself. You can buy 3D printed models from other retailers, from other people online, local people, etc. Be aware that you're most likely not going to be able to run them. You won't be able to take your 3D printed army to the GW store and play a game at the store because... yeah, of course you're not going to be able to.
They have have active policies against
that. Individual friendly local game stores and individual events may or may not have rules about 3D printed models. Just check, because the nice thing about 3D printed models is it's usually a lot cheaper. You can get some really cool alternative sculpts, but it's also alternative sculpts. So some events are no, we're running a competitive event and we rely on people being able to, at a glance, look at a model and say, yes, this is an assault intercessor, and not have to like stop and ask what it is because it's an alternate model that looks different. So, there are reasonable policies for some places as to like why they may or may not let you use 3D printed models. GW official events are not going to, or may have like some small exceptions, but 3D printing's, 3D printing's a whole hobby in and of itself. Again, another one of those like nested hobbies within the hobby. But it creates another path for models that are available for you to purchase depending on what you're wanting to do with them. This is something actually I thought about earlier when we were talking about the other combat patrols. If you're playing in your garage, like if you're just playing with your friends and you want to play Dark Angels, you want to play the Robe Dark Angels, but the only combat patrol you can get your hands on is the Blood Angels one. If you're playing in your garage, you can take those Sanguinary Guard and like add shields to them and say that they're Blade Guard. You can do whatever you want with the hobby. Like, that's the beauty of this, is like, you can kit bash, you can take models, you can convert them, you can make up your own things. And as long as your opponent agrees to let you do that, that's fine. That's one of the joys of this hobby, is being able to go in and kit bash and make stuff that is unique and make stuff that is different. Be aware that depending on what your goal for the hobby is, you may not be able to always use those because, you can't rock up to an event with like, hey, this is my custom Space Marine army with custom units that I created in my garage. They're not going to let you do that. But, you can do that type of stuff and have fun with it and create conversions and create new models and stuff on your own if you're just playing in your garage and your opponent, and your friends agree to do that. So,
yeah. I don't want to get into the whole issue of like intellectual property here. Like that's its own discussion.
Yes,
obviously, because there's a difference between getting models that have different aesthetics, but kind of like I represent, but I'm legally distinct from blah, versus this is just clearly a scan, like a 3D scan of a GW model that somebody has put online, so they don't have to pay GW prices.
Right.
I don't want to get into that discussion right now, but there is a clear difference between the two.
For sure. And, in general, don't go for people that are just trying to copy and create things. Like, support people who are creating unique and interesting things. So, that's where I come down on it.
Yeah, and also there's a number of army styles. Like, you might read through the 40K lore and decide, hey, I really like Praetorian Guard, which is a group of Imperial Guard or Astra Militarum that dress like late 1800s British troops with like the pith helmets and the red coats and everything. Games Workshop once upon a time had Praetorian Guard miniatures in metal. They don't anymore. So maybe you look online and like, I'm going to buy a Praetorian Guard 3D printed army, because there are people that either do bits that you can use with Games Workshop models, or have just full multi-part 3D printed resin model kits that you can either print or buy pre-printed. And I'm going to build that because it's the only way to build the army that I want to build. I think it's funny that the grand narrative, if I remember right, is set on the planet of Mordian.
Yes.
And the Mordian Iron Guard were a 40K regiment that was like a guard regiment that was available for years and years, again, as metal models. They don't make any Mordian Iron Guard models anymore. So if you wanted to play a lore authentic Mordian Iron Guard, you would have to go to a third party to have it made. So, there's definitely cases to be made for proxies. But yeah, 3D printing yourself, if you don't already have a 3D printer, I would not recommend going that path as a new player. Like that.
Yeah. Like I said, 3D printing is a hobby in and of itself that you can spend as much or more money on than 40K itself. So if you were interested in 3D printing, this is an interesting way to like supplement, do usage for it. But yeah, I would definitely not recommend like, oh yeah, buy a 3D printer just to play 40K. That's a bad idea.
Right. Now, one thing that's not necessarily a bad idea is buying used armies. Used armies are actually a really neat way to get into the game at a slightly cheaper price point, because here's the thing. There's lots of churn in this hobby, strangely enough.
Yeah.
There are, and not necessarily, there are definitely players who are going to like, I'm going to switch to another game because like you might find someone who's like, I played 40K for a while and it wasn't quite working for me, but then I saw Age of Sigmar and I switched over to that. And now my 40K army is just taking up space.
Yeah.
Or, hey, I had a big expense come up and I'm just not going to be able to do 40K. Or I just started a new job and I'm going to be working nights and that's the only time I can play 40K. So I'm probably going to sell off my army. But also, you get people who are like, I used to play this army. I played this army for years, but then I got into this other army because I was kind of bored with that one. And so now I have this new army. I think I'm going to sell my old army. This happens decently frequently. Also, we mentioned like chasing the meta. People who chase the meta will often ditch old armies to buy new armies.
Yeah.
So there are definitely places where you can buy armies, or maybe somebody got started on it and they realized they were never going to finish, or like it was a side project that never came to fruition. Maybe they're purging their shelf of shame, their pile of potential, whatever you want to call it, and trying to get some kits out of it that they are not going to do anything with. So there's definitely places you can find that stuff. eBay is obviously a decent resource for finding used armies, and you can just search 40K army and you'll find tons of listings. Beware of the words pro painted, which usually means somebody painted this and I'm going to charge more for it.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things about used armies is used armies are often already built. So if you wanted to do any particular customizations, that's going to be harder, but it's a way, like if you are just getting started, this is definitely a way to get your hands on an army, often saving you that build time that we talked about earlier in the episode. So that is definitely an option. Just be aware also, anytime somebody ships models that are already assembled, there may be some breakage just because mail gets tossed around and you can only pack things up so neatly. No matter how much you try to pad something with foam and bubble wrap, things will break. So just be aware you may have to do some repairs. Also, Facebook Marketplace, I wouldn't say there's a lot there, but I've definitely seen people selling models and armies locally on Facebook Marketplace. That one usually has the benefit of, if you're buying from somebody locally, they don't have to ship it to you. You just have to meet somewhere, exchange money. And if they are selling 40K stuff, they will probably be willing to meet you at like a local game store because they may be a regular there. Speaking of local game stores, a lot of local game stores, not all, but there's a good number of them that will actually sell models on commission. Like they'll sell used models. I know there's a couple here in the KC area that do. Obviously, Frontline Gaming has something similar online. In fact, I think they just opened it back up, which is their secondhand shop. And if you ever get a chance to go to something like Las Vegas Open, where they have a big presence because they're running it, they will have a big secondhand market where you can just I've bought bags of models there. Yeah, it's great. It's just something like somebody didn't want it anymore. Well, I will buy it and I'll use it.
And it's also great because a lot of times, you can get really good deals, but also you can find models that are out of print. For example, not that I did this because I looked at it and I'm like, that's really cool. I'm not spending that much money. At LVO, there was another company that was selling like used models, and they had a Praetorian Battle Force box from the 90s that was like still sealed, that they're like, yeah, you can buy this. Give us like $2,000 for it, but you can buy this and like get models that have been out of print for 30 years. If it had not been if it had been, I would have been willing to pay more than I should have for it, but I was not willing to pay $2,000 for it. We'll put it that way.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
But yeah, like you can find older sculpts, you can find older models, things that are out of print, things that are like out of stock through these as well. And like that is interesting because that creates, unique models for your army. And when you show up, like, hey, I've got this second edition captain or whatever, you can do these things and kind of like build into fun storytelling elements of why these models are different. And it creates things that make the army your own, which is always exciting.
Yeah. Now, like buying used armies, they may already be partially painted or completely painted. Sometimes that will cost more, like those will cost more because somebody's put a little bit more work into them. Sometimes that'll actually cost less because people, like, especially if it's an auction, people may not want to bid as high on something that, well, I'm going to have to put work into this by stripping the paint off and repainting it myself. But if you're a new player, you may not care. Like, it's like, hey, if I can buy an army and it's already done, great.
Yeah.
And also, speaking of local game stores, if your local game store has a community, whether like an online community, whether it's like Discord or Facebook or whatever, those are also good places to check to see if anybody is getting rid of old armies. In fact, I have sold kits where I'm like, I have all the kits for this particular army that I need, and I somehow ended up with extras. And someone's like, "Hey, I'm looking to get this. Do you have anything?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll gladly sell you the stuff I'm not using. It's just sitting on my shelf." So you can definitely find deals that way as well if you can find get involved in your community, which you're going to need to do anyway to play the game. That's actually a good place to find used armies as well. There's a couple of other purchases besides the armies themselves that I do want to touch on. First of those is your codex. Codexes, if you've heard any of our past episodes, a little bit of a sore point with us in recent years. Now, that's not to say like codexes contain the rules for your army. So that kind of makes them you kind of got to have this. Also, it is the only way to unlock their online rules in the Games Workshop app, which a lot of people use for tracking their rules in a game. There is no way to buy access to those online rules separately. And basically, you buy a codex, and the print copy in the inside back cover will have a code that you have to go to. I think it's mywarhammer.com, create an account there, unlock, like you'll enter in the code to unlock it, and that'll unlock that codex on your account. Some armies require 2 codexes because if you are, we mentioned Space Marines, you will need the Space Marine codex. And then if you are playing one of the more divergent chapters, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, Space Wolves, Black Templars, you will also need to buy the codex supplement for that particular army, because that's where that army's specific rules and specific special units will be. And some of them definitely have more special units than others. Like Dark Angels, Blood Angels have a decent amount. Space Wolves have a bunch. Black Templars have a bunch. They play very differently.
Yeah.
And a codex is 60, and those codex supplements are 30. So that's $90 to unlock your rules. And I will say this is something where buying used, if you're going to buy used, you may not want to, because that code is very likely to have been used already. So you won't be able to unlock it on yours because they are unique per book. And if you're shopping at, like, I like to buy stuff like books from Half Price Books or other discount places like that. Those may often be for older editions. So that's one where like you see a book, it's like, oh, hey, that's Codex Space Marines. It may not be the right Codex Space Marines. So just be aware of that.
Right.
Now, there are 2 armies, Death Watch and Chaos Demons, which do not have a print codex, will not be getting a print codex. We don't know if they're going to survive in their current formats in a new edition. So you may want to be careful about getting into those, but those rules are available for free. You don't have to unlock anything. Now, one of those 2, Death Watch, is a Space Marine derivative, so you still have to have the Space Marine codex to get the most out of that army. But at least their specific rules do not require an additional purchase. Now, one of the reasons why codexes are a source point for us is that codexes in 10th edition are often not accurate for long.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look, we mentioned earlier that armies are built on a point system. The points page on every 10th edition codex has a QR code that will take you to the page where you can download the real points list, because whatever is printed in the codex is not accurate and was not meant to be. And often they are different on day 0. Like that book comes out, that is not the right point total.
And that's, we've talked about this, but not everybody's heard all these episodes. That's like the downside of running trying to keep a live rule system. There's 6-month print lead time on a physical book, and, having the book printed and then shipped and all of those things. So you can put points in that are accurate at that time, but the meta changes. They do quarterly rebalancing within the game. So anytime that you see a brand new codex, that book was printed probably 2 rules updates ago. So the balance is different now. The meta is different now. So to me, it is a mark against why are we doing physical codexes still? We should be doing digital rules distribution, or just not printing the points in the book and, say, hey, just go online to do this. And which is why it's egregious to me that there's no ability to buy things directly in the digital app, because digital rules distribution should be the way forward. And then, I love my codexes. I have multiple shelves of codexes from previous editions because there's great lore, there's great photos, there's great missions, and it's a good history of the game. But yeah, like that's not needed for everybody. If you're brand new to this game and you're just looking to play, you don't need to spend $60 to find the history of the Space Marines. You just want your points and your rules. So give people an option to have those points and rules. Maybe that'll change the new edition. They've seemed to have gotten better about it in some of their other games, with different ways of distributing the rules for cheaper. Old World, one of their fantasy relaunch game, comes with these arcane journals, which are these slim paperback books that, like, yeah, they still have the same issues with printing and stuff being out of date, but they don't rebalance that game as often. And it's a $20 paperback, so it's faster to print and it doesn't feel bad when you buy it. And there's FAQs because, yeah, it's going to be this book's literally going to fall apart in a couple of years anyway. So sure, I buy a new one. Paying $60 or more for a hardcover codex that is out of date day one sucks.
Yeah.
It's a bad feeling.
And not only are the points an issue, there are some armies that have had their army rules rewritten. Three that come to mind: Adeptus Mechanicus, Gene Stealer Cults, and the Tau have had their like the Tau most recently. They had their army rule changed. If you play the rules out of the book, they're not accurate. In fact, Space Marines, they've changed how the army, they are the most like common army. Mm-hmm. Their army rule had to be changed because there were issues with how it worked with some of the, like, to kind of balance them over the divergent chapters so that they weren't less powerful than like Blood Angels or Dark Angels. So they had to change that up. So technically your Codex Space Marines is inaccurate if you try to play it as written. So yeah, print codexes don't last long in this edition as far as being, the gold standard of rules.
And, to be clear, because if you're like brand new to this hobby, you're listening to this and you're like, well, why would you do this then? Because it's, why are they trying to update things so frequently if all these issues? GW for the longest time had the opposite problem where they would not update rules for decades. And this, while it's inconvenient and annoying, this is better than what they used to do. Doesn't mean it's the end, the end system, or like the end result of what they can do, because there are definitely ways they could find middle grounds. But this is so much better than it used to be, where armies like Dark Eldar and Necrons would go 2 or 3 editions without getting rules updates. And armies would just disappear between editions. Because we didn't know what to do with them, so squats disappeared after first edition and just didn't come back until we got Leagues of Votann a couple years ago. So this is better. It doesn't mean they can't also like do better going forward, but the living rule balance that we have is frustrating to keep up with at times, but it is actually a better system than what we used to have. So
yeah, I will say there are a couple of other resources that I do want to mention, because you're going to hear about them. So I might as well just be upfront and put them here. The two are Wahapedia and New Recruit. Wahapedia is a repository of all the rules for Warhammer 40K, I think from like 7th edition up through 10th. I think they go all the way back to 7th edition. Mm-hmm. It is not an official site. They have Games Workshop has been trying to get them shut down for years, but they've decided they are based out of Russia, and Russia doesn't care. So IP laws have no effect on them. That is still a thing you can go to. And it is also, if you are just looking for a quick reference, it's one of the fastest ways to look something up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the app is good, but if it's an army I don't have unlocked in the app, like I need to know, like, okay, does this work? Especially if I'm researching an army. If I want to find out, is this an army I want to play? How would I do this? I'm not going to buy a codex for an army I don't play yet. I don't know if I'm going to play. So that's a repository of knowledge. Again, we can get into the argument over the legality of that, but it exists. It does exist, and the rules are there. I can't speak to how often they get updated. It seems like they try to stay on top of things, but it is one of the side effects of it being a third party. You are dependent on a
Yeah.
third party to update it. Whereas Games Workshop generally updates their app as close to real time as they can with other releases. New Recruit is kind of a competitor for the Warhammer 40K app, although it is primarily an army builder, but it does have a play mode where it will show you all the rules for your army and all the rules for the individual units and all the stratagems and such you can use for them. So that's another option. Although again, it is dependent on third-party updates. It is only as good as the data that is loaded into it, and so they are
Yeah.
dependent on people taking the data the Games Workshop has put out and updating the data that is available for New Recruit. But those are two tools that are out there to use for learning army rules. And again, if you are just getting into it, just doing research on the game, I can't say that Wahapedia is a bad resource. If you decide you want to use the GW app, you will need to buy the codex. So eventually you are going to have to put some money down.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens in 11th edition with the switch to faction packs where everything is downloadable. We'll see if maybe that moves us towards more of a digital future. I would like to hope so, but I don't know how much the money-making system of selling hardcover books is baked into their business model.
Well, and this is probably a good time, and maybe we should have mentioned this previously, but I see that there's still a path going forward for them to be able to do hardcover book printing in other ways to still get lore and stuff like that out there. Because we talked about a couple episodes, the character encyclopedia.
Mm-hmm.
If they are more comfortable printing things like that, where it's like, hey, this is a faction resource for Space Marines. Boom, here's all the new lore, etc. Or, Tau, Photon, etc., and make money that way, and frankly, like offload some of the print costs or to a third-party printer, that may be a better business model for them, where it's like, oh, well, yeah, we work with this publisher to print an evergreen book that is lore, and then we did digital distribution on the rules. That could be a better system going forward, hopefully. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I would like
whether they'll do it or not, we'll see.
Yeah. One other product that you will sometimes see for sale, reference cards, which is like, hey, here's reference cards for all the units in your army. Don't bother. Don't bother. They're often out of date when you buy them.
Yeah. They are useful, but yeah.
Yeah, enough things get changed that when the edition first dropped, they released index rules for everybody. And they were basically print cardboard versions of the rules that you could download for free, but it was nice to have them available on the table. Codexes got rolled out, those ceased to be useful. And because there have been enough armies, again, that have had units changed for balance update, for balance reasons, I don't find them being a particularly good purchase, especially when if you bought the codex, you already have the rules unlocked in your app. And, not to play the whole Blizzard, y'all have phones, don't you? But that is one of the ways that Games Workshop is looking to push rules to people is through their app. Yeah. So it's something a lot of people use.
Yeah.
So, okay, you've bought your army. You figured out the best way to buy your army, to get the models that you wanted. You've got your rules one way or another. It's time to learn to play. Well, the first thing you have to do before you learn to play is actually build the model. And this is also a good time to read your army rules and get familiar with them while you're building your models. A couple things you will need for building your army. Get a decent set of clippers. You will need clippers to take models off the sprue. Do not buy the Games Workshop brand. While they are a perfectly fine tool, functionally, they are way expensive. Way more expensive than what you need.
Yeah.
And for not expensive quality.
In general, the GW hobby products are too expensive. There are some good ones we've talked about in the past. Paint handles, the paint paint pot, like the paint the water pot.
Water cups.
Water cup is really good. They're still expensive. Michael's is your friend, has most of the same stuff, and it's going to be way cheaper. Their hobby stores have almost all of the same stuff. You can find places that have it. Other brands exist. Amazon, online retailers, have a lot of the same stuff as well. There is a convenience to being able to pick something up because, hey, I'm picking up models, and I'll just buy the GW clippers because they're right here, and I get it, and they're on, impulse buy. But I would recommend not doing it because in general you're paying a hobby tax. You're paying for convenience. Sometimes it's worth it. Most times it's not. I would say just wait and buy something online or buy something from a different store, or go to the hobby, go to frickin' Walmart or Target has sections where they have clippers and super glue and some of these things and hobby knives. So in general, the GW stuff is fine. It's just way too expensive.
Yeah. To put this in comparison, the Citadel Tools Superfine Detail Cutters, which is the only set of clippers they have on their website right now, is $53. If the Army Painter Precision Side Cutters, which is one of the ones I use, is $14. And even that's expensive compared to like some of the cheapies you can get for like $5 to $7 on Amazon.
Yeah.
Like for tools, things like this, you can go cheap, especially, they'll get the job done. You do not have to buy like the God Hand level clippers. God Hands are fantastic. Well, they are appropriately named. They are made for doing like Gunpla style modeling. And they're only slightly more expensive than the GW.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like if you were going to spend $50 on clippers, which I would not recommend starting out, but don't buy the GW version because there are better clippers for $50. If you want to enter that price point, there's so much better options. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like, get a decent set of clippers, and whether that is, a $15 set from Army Painter, or you decide to go a little bit cheaper and get some, like there's some $18 sets for doing models that you can get. Tamiya has some for $26, which is at the upper end of what I would recommend. But yeah, it's like there's plenty of clippers you can get. Besides that, get a decent hobby knife. Any X-Acto style knife will do with replaceable blades, because you'll need that for cleaning up like mold lines and things like that, and clearing off the marks where you clipped the model off of the sprue. And then you'll need to get some super glue or plastic cement. Super glue is more flexible in that you can use it with metal, resin. Like if you got some 3D printed stuff, you're going to need to use super glue, not plastic cement, because it won't work with plastic cement. It will not work. Also, super glue can often set faster than plastic cement can. Plastic cement takes a little bit extra time to cure, but it has the benefit of making a generally better bond, because the models at like the pieces of plastic actually like melted together and fused, rather than just being like adhered with a layer of glue. So whichever way you want to go, there's not really a wrong way. Super glue also has the benefit, if you want to use like a accelerant to make the curing time go faster, you can get that, although it is stinky, so be aware of that. Like spray it in a place with good ventilation.
And also like accelerant does tend, since it's curing faster, it tends to not be as strong. So that's something to be aware of as well. Like you're getting it dried faster, but it tends to be more brittle.
Yeah. So just be aware of that. But whichever path you want to go down, they're both fine. You can, I think the one real benefit for super glue is there's so many places you can get it. There's like, you can go to a hardware store and get super glue, but plastic cement, you tend to need to go to like a modeling store or a gaming store to get a decent set.
Loctite Professional is kind of my go-to on super glue, because it's thin and it dries pretty fast, and you can literally buy it at any store.
Yeah.
Walmart, Target, hobby stores. As far as plastic glue, I swear by the Tester's super toxic red tube. And I call it super toxic because it does have fumes, but it works like a charm on plastic. Melts it together, you get a super strong bond. It dries pretty fast, but you can find that at a Michael's type store. Hobby stores, if they sell the Tamiya thin plastic glue, is really nice because it comes in a little pot with a brush applicator. So you can, the problem with the Testers is that it usually comes in a tube. So it's very easy to put way more on than you want, and if you're not careful, you will melt details and like do other damage to the models. With the Tamiya plastic cement with the brush, you could literally just dip it in, brush on the part you need, and then stick it together, and you're good. So it's a little bit harder to find, but those are the ones that I recommend as far as glues.
Yeah. And honestly, I use GW plastic cement. It's fine. It does a decent job. It's got a very thin needle applicator. So
that's nice.
So that one's not a bad choice either. That's one of the GW hobby products where I'm like, yeah, that one's actually fine. But yeah, I've heard like the Tamiya one is like the gold standard as far as like for miniature work.
I don't even think they sell it anymore. Actually, yeah, I'm looking on the website. They don't even sell it anymore. But GW used to sell super glue. It's just Gorilla Glue. It's formulated exactly the same. So it doesn't even look like they sell it anymore. They only sell the plastic glue. But like, don't buy the GW super glue. It's literally just Gorilla Glue you can get at Walmart.
Yeah. All right, so you've got your models assembled now. It's time to play. First off, the thing you're going to need to play the game is you need to find an opponent or a play group. This is where local stores or clubs and GW stores as well, even if they only have a couple of tables available, there are communities that meet there, clubs that meet there, and will get their games in there. If you are getting in and you know somebody who already plays, great, you have an opponent. If you have friends who are getting into the game alongside you, like I mentioned that starter set early on where it's like, hey, $220. If you can split it, it's 110 each. Now you've got a friend who's going to play alongside you, or you bought the starter set by yourself and you're like, well, hey, I'll play this one, you play this army, and we can swap back and forth, decide what we like. If you can find that, I'd say like local stores are one of the best ways, just because you'll have a lot more players available. But whichever way you go, you need to find an opponent. And then I would recommend, the other part about that is you want to find somebody who will let you start small. So like jumping right into a tournament will be hard because most of those are going to be 2,000 points and are going to be like very competitive. Hence, they are a competitive play aspect. But otherwise, I would say if you can, start small, and your two options there are Combat Patrol, which we have talked about. It is its own game mode. The thing I've mostly heard about Combat Patrol, it is a decent place to get started. It gets stale very fast.
Yeah.
Like you may be able to play Combat Patrol regularly for like a month or two, and then you'll be like, well, I want to change up my army, or I want to play different missions, or I'd like to, play just something, play against something else. And that's not an option in Combat Patrol. And I know Dennis has started when the new edition came out, he had moved down to Dallas. And so he got started with some new players, and they all kind of started with Combat Patrol. And I think that lasted for like 3 months. And then they went to 1,000-point games just because they got more stuff they wanted to use, which Combat Patrol doesn't allow you to use any additional models. And so they wanted a different experience. So 1,000-point games is kind of where I would say that is probably one of the best places to start, because it's a more satisfying experience. You have more flexibility. You get to build the army you want to build rather than what GW has built for you ahead of time. There's a lot more variety in missions, whether you are using missions out of like White Dwarf or you are using like the mission decks that are available. I haven't really touched on those, mostly because those are damn near impossible to buy because GW never keeps them in stock. But there's apps that will kind of like simulate that experience. And then there's just like the generic mission out of like the open war mission in the book, like in the core rule book that you can play. But 1,000 points is kind of where I consider the optimal starting experience. The games aren't huge, so there's not as much to juggle, but you can still have a variety of units on the tabletop. You can get a feel for vehicles and monsters and moving infantry around and assault and shooting. And it's just a really good experience. Also, the fact that it is smaller armies helps with the fact that you are going to be slow at first.
Yes.
You do not know especially if like this is your first game of 40K, you do not know the rules yet. You do not know your army inside and out. It takes time to internalize that. Set aside time for teaching games, especially if you find a local group that you can play with and say, hey, I want to get started. Can I get together with a teaching game? I did one of those a few weeks back for somebody who wasn't new to 40K, but hadn't played since 3rd edition.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, this is a completely different beast now. So we're basically going to kind of start off fresh. And he knew that. And he had decided to go with an army that I think hits the points of this army's not terribly expensive to get into, because you can get into it really with like a combat patrol or two. And that was Adeptus Custodes. Because you can get into, like, you buy 2 combat patrols for Custodes or a combat patrol and like 1 or 2 of their infantry boxes.
Yeah.
which you have an army. He's got a 2,000 point army. It's all infantry and it's surprisingly sturdy because it's Custodes. They are like the ultimate elite army.
Yeah.
And we basically played like a 2,000 point game, but it was, we kind of took our time with it. And I offered, like I kind of gave tactical suggestions of like, well, hey, I know what your army can kind of do. So you should probably like, these targets are available. This is the one I might prioritize. If he asked me for it, like I wasn't necessarily running the game for him, but it also, he got a chance to get used to the rules, and I would walk him through like, okay, so we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. This is how this rule works, things like that. So find somebody, if you can find somebody who will help you through that process, that's great. Just know those games are going to take longer because you're going to have lots of questions. You're going to be getting the rules together in your head. Now, I will say, and we have talked about it before when we have rated the aspects of the game, 10th edition is an amazing edition to learn. It is super easy to teach. You pick it up very quickly. You don't have a lot of the weirdness of interactions that we've had in past editions, especially like 3rd through 7th, which, I mean, we all came up on, but this edition is way easier to learn. So it won't take you a long time to get on your feet, but just make sure, it is going to take you a while. Also, you will make mistakes. You will make constant mistakes. You will make tactical choices that are bad. You will deploy models in bad spots that will either lock you off from doing what you want to do or leave you exposed and at your opponent's mercy. You will forget to use rules. You don't have a lot of stratagems available in this edition. You will forget to use them at key points.
Yep.
It will happen. But don't feel bad because experienced players make those same mistakes.
Yeah, so you'll still make those mistakes after 20 years of playing. So,
yes, yeah. But like, allow yourself to make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up for it. Learn from it. Like, realize, oh, I lost this game at the deployment stage. I deployed badly. I need to learn how to deploy better. Things like that. It's like, oh, I leaned too hard into this unit. I thought this unit was going to be my unit that can defeat everything, and no, it turned out this was more of a rock paper scissors match and I picked the wrong one, that kind of thing. Yep. That will happen. It's fine. It's part of the process. It's like anything. Like, you are going to make mistakes while you play the game. Also, do not expect to win your first game. You might, but don't expect it. It may take you a while to get your first win. It may take a couple of years to get your first win.
You might go playing a whole edition with an army, actually 2 editions with an army before you get your first win in 6th edition with Tau.
You speak from experience.
Yeah. They were really bad in 5th edition.
they weren't great. But don't give up, because that is part of the game. See how close you get to winning. Look for those little like strategic victories. Like, you know what? I lost the game, but man, this character survived like the whole game and I didn't think he would. Or, man, I took down that big thing over there with like these little guys. That was cool. Look for those moments that are just like, oh, that was the cool thing. Maybe I didn't win the game, but I had a moral victory with that particular play.
And to be honest with you, as somebody who's played this game for a very long time, those are the moments that you remember way more than, I rocked up and I curb stomped somebody or got curb stomped. It's like, oh yeah, this cool moment happened in a fight where a drone and a zoanthrope had a glorious ineptitude slap fight for 3 rounds.
Yep.
Like, and then we talk about it, we make a t-shirt of it later. Like, that's the stuff that you remember. That's the stuff that's way cooler than will last longer than, this unit of Marines rocked up and curb stomped cultists. So
yeah, those little moments of unlikely victories or just weird things happening. Like, you made like 10 saves in a row that you should have, like, you would have died if you failed any of them, but somehow you managed to shrug off like a blistering barrage of fire. That's the moment. Like, those little moments are things you're going to remember.
Or the opposite, the time that I lost a whole unit of Terminators to 5 wounds. Anyway.
But
those weren't armor piercing. Those are armor. Those are just 2-up armor saves, and I rolled 5 ones.
It happens. It's a game with dice, and sometimes the dice will screw you. But yeah, don't give up. Don't like, if you aren't winning at first, don't give up. Try different things. Also know, like, some matchups are just going to be, some armies are going to be stronger than others at certain matchups. That is just a thing. You know, you
Yeah.
have,
Just because GW balances the game quarterly does not mean that the game is balanced.
it is more
Like,
balanced than has been in the past,
yes.
but it is not perfect. You know,
Yeah.
it's like there's like 20 something factions. Like it is so hard to balance that
Yeah.
many factions with that many units and that many variants of play. It they don't have a job I envy. I'll just say that.
No, not at all.
But I will say, fight the urge to change your army immediately. It's very easy to fall into the trap of, man, I lost my first game. I should get different units and play something different. Well, you only played the army once.
Yeah.
You didn't know it that well. Play it again.
And it is a game, as you mentioned, it is a dice game. So sometimes you can do everything correct, do all of the correct tactics, do everything, set up exactly the way you want, deploy exactly you want, get the right matchups, and your dice just shit the bed. So yeah, try it again, play multiple times. Yeah, don't give up for sure.
To quote Jean-Luc Picard, it is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not weakness, that is life.
Yes.
And it is true in 40K as it is in real life. So, but yeah, play the army you have, get to know it, repetition. Like I usually recommend play an army at least a half dozen times before you start making changes. Like play an army, get to know it, figure out what it does, figure out its strengths and weaknesses, figure out like, okay, so this unit that I picked, I've tried several times. It's just not doing the thing for me. Or it's close, but I need something else to help support it. That's when you start making changes. Like go do the reps on it and get to know it. Also, fight the urge to completely switch armies. And I say this as somebody who has way too many armies. Like you play an army and you're like, oh man, that didn't go the way I thought it would. I'm going to buy a new army. No, that is so expensive. You will burn through your hobby budget so fast doing that. I would play before I look at switching up an army. And now I have several armies, so I will rotate through them like every 3 to 6 months just to stay on top of them. But these are all armies I have already completed, or maybe I'm just adding like one unit to these armies. These are not me starting from scratch. But if I was starting new, I generally try to play an army for at least a year regularly. Play it regularly for at least a year before I start contemplating switching. There have been one or two exceptions, but it's never been with my main army. I played Tau for years, and then I was like, you know what? I'm getting tired of this being an all shooting army. I'm going to try an all assault army. A friend of mine was selling their World Eaters, so I bought their World Eaters. And I tried that out. I'm like, nah, this is one note in the other direction, and it isn't speaking to me. So I found a friend to sell it to. And yep. I found Kevin, and Kevin bought the World Eaters and has run with it because that does speak to you. That army, that play style gels with you quite nicely.
Yeah, it turns out I'm very simple. Run up and hit it with a stick. Turns out to work really well for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that army worked for me. But it's kind of funny because our hobby journeys up to a certain point are very similar because we both started with Tau because we liked the aesthetic. We liked kind of the way they played, but Tau were very one note shooty. So we went the opposite direction of like one note in the other direction with Melee and World Eaters. And then from there, like you were like, nope, this isn't for me. And I was like, nope, this absolutely is for me. And yeah, so it's just very interesting that everyone has their unique journey, their own process, their own way of getting to like where they, what they want to do in the hobby and what you want to do changes. I've played my World Eaters since almost exclusively since like 9th edition. And like I'm taking Voton this week to the Grand Heretics. I'm like, I want to do something different. I still love my World Eaters, still love that army, but I need to do something different. So
yeah. But again, this is somebody
your hobby results will change.
Yeah, you have played that army a lot. You know it inside and out. And yeah, you do want to change. Like I rotate between Tau, Sisters of Battle, Chaos Space Marines. Now I have a couple other armies available, but those are the three I usually like rotate between. Again, those armies are pretty much complete. Like while I have units I'm adding to them, like my list for Sisters, I've been playing basically the same list for Sisters for months now. I am actually looking at starting a couple of additional armies. There are projects that are in very early stage. Like I have a Trader Guard army that I would like to work on, but as I addressed earlier, Guard's an expensive army. And so I'm kind of like, that one is kind of a project for a long term as I can piece it together. The other thing I discovered is if I put together all the kits that I have left of just like random Space Marines that I've acquired for as part of other bundles or things like that, I can build 1,000-point Death Watch army. I just need to get the shoulder pads.
Yeah.
And so that's 1,000-point army I could put together with stuff I already have, other than having to get a few add-ons. Like I could spend less than $100. I could probably spend about 60 or so to get like the 3 or 4 sets of Death Watch upgrades that I would need to shoulder pad everybody. And I've got a 1,000-point Death Watch army that I could just start running.
Yeah.
But that is a special case. But if I would not jump armies if you don't already have. And the great thing is eventually having 2 armies is great because you can jump back and forth as like, okay, I've done what I want to do with this one for right now. Let's try this one out. Okay, I've played this one for like 6 months, 8 months. Now I'm going to switch back to the first one. And
yeah, or having 2 armies allows you to like get other people involved and be like, hey,
exactly.
Do you want to come over and play in the garage? And like, hey, I already have an army. You can play it, and I can show you how to play it. And then you started someone else on their hobby journey.
Yeah, exactly. And I mentioned earlier buying used armies. Used armies are often sold at a loss. When you consider the amount of work that you've put into them, you are not going to generally get that out. You will probably sell it for retail at best, probably a little bit less to try to move it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have done a lot of really good hobby work onto it, in which case you can sell it for more. But if you are just getting into the game, you probably don't have the hobby experience to command those kinds of prices yet. So just be aware if you were like, well, I'll sell my army the way I sold the other one. You can use that to help pay for a new army, but it generally won't get you all the way there. So just be aware of that.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I wanted to touch on is hobby time. And I mentioned earlier, like you can play without painting. That is totally fine. Some people, painting is not their thing.
Yeah.
And especially if you are trying out new units, if you are trying out a new army, you can do your playing and your painting side by side. Obviously not at the exact same time, but you can kind of alternate like, hey, this week I'm going to play one night and then I'm going to do a couple of days of painting.
I'm trying to think about the logistics of painting and playing. Like, so I activate this unit, let me pick it up, put a couple pro strokes on, set them down, line up and shoot. Yeah, I was thinking about the logistics of that. I'm like, that could work, but that's seems inefficient. Anyway,
it is horribly inefficient. But I do like the spectacle of having 2 fully painted armies on the table. It looks great.
Oh, so 2 fully painted armies with like fully painted terrain creates a really immersive, really cinematic looking, like visually appealing thing. If you're up at a store and you've got 2 well-painted armies and like fully painted terrain, people will stop and see what you're doing. Like it's good. It's fun to have fully painted armies.
Yeah. And they don't even have to be quote unquote well painted. And the reason I say that is,
yeah, that's why I said fully painted.
Fully painted. Yeah. Cause there's a lot of painters online, people who teach painting on YouTube, and a lot of them are high end, like competition painters or professional painters. And it can be very intimidating when you are looking at the work they're doing and they make it look very easy. And then you try it. It's like, this is really hard and I don't get it. That's because they have years and years of experience. And a lot of them are painting more for painting competitions than they are painting for, these are models I'm going to use on the table day in and day out. Don't feel intimidated by that. Look for them. Let them be inspiration. They do not have to be the standard you have to reach. Because again, those people are entering painting competitions. If that's a thing you want to go for, then yes, that is a lead you can follow. But you don't have to. And there's plenty of cases. Games Workshop actually does some decent tutorials on how to do battle ready stuff, which is basically what they call getting a model painted enough that it'll work on the tabletop. It's not going to be fancy, but it'll look decent. And shortcuts are fine. You do not have to paint every tiny little detail every little bit. I know what even Louise Sugden, I think she said that if you can't see it on the model, you don't really have to take the time to paint it if you don't want to.
Yeah, GW models are fantastic. In my opinion, the best plastics in the industry. They also are insanely detailed, and it can be intimidating when you start to paint to like look at a Space Marine captain, which Space Marines are like pretty standard, like pretty bare like models, but like you get a captain and he's got fancy shoulder pads and a cape and like all these little gubbins on his belt and stuff. It can be really intimidating to paint all of that. And you don't have to. Like, you could just, paint. You don't have to go in and do like edge highlighting on, the grenade that he has on his belt. You could literally just paint it, a solid color and move on. Yeah, you don't have to get bogged down in all the details. And starting out, I would recommend not doing that. And I would recommend starting out, like testing paint schemes and stuff, using that on like infantry and troops, because they tend to be a little bit smaller, or less detailed, and they tend to be, you have a bunch of them, so like mistakes or things that are slightly different aren't going to show up as much, and then focus on like the more expensive and more detailed characters later. But that's just kind of my own way of doing it. But yeah, you don't have to go in and get all of the details. You can literally leave some of that stuff hidden, and that's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as like shortcuts you can take, there's a couple things that you'll see a lot. Contrast paints or speed paints, express paints, different vendors put them under different names. And basically the way those work is you paint them on top of a light colored priming layer. So you will need to prime your minis, or at least base coat them in like a white or light gray, or sometimes you can do a black and then like brush lighter paint over it to create shadows. That's called what's called slap chop painting. You'll hear that sometimes, where you basically take a black, brush it with mostly dry paint and with like light gray or white to get all the highlights, and then just apply shade to it. That is a totally valid way to get your minis painted on the table. And honestly, with some of the contrast paints, like that can look really good. I mean, it can get the work done.
It's a really great way to get a Leagues of Votann army painted in a month before the grand narrative.
Yeah. And if you do not like spending a lot of time painting, like if you just like, I want to get something that looks decent, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, contrast paints and dry brushing will get you like almost 100% of the way there.
Yeah.
Don't feel bad about doing shortcuts, because often a lot of those cheat techniques will get you something. Because the thing to remember is, when you are playing Warhammer, you are not like with your head down on the table looking at the model like right next to you. You are playing at arm's distance.
Yeah.
And if it looks decent from like an arm's distance away, it'll look great. That's as far as you really need to go. I like getting into some of the finer details. I am somebody who has done painting competitions. I do sometimes like to push myself as a painter, but it's not required. I also have models like for BattleTech. BattleTech is one of those games where it's like, this is my like palette cleanser army painting, where I will use contrast paints all day long. I'll just like, because the models have a lot of like detail that handles contrast paints well. So I'm just like, okay, I'll prime it white, apply some colors, dry brush some highlights on, boom, I'm done. And it's just like, I knock those out. So it just depends on like what my goal is with a particular model. There have been models that I've painted on commission where I have spent like a lot of time getting little bitty details and little bitty highlights and things like that done. But if you're just starting out and you just want to get a painted army on the table, you don't have to do that. Don't feel bad about it.
Yeah. The best color's done.
Done is the best color, to quote the Jaded Gamercast podcast gone these many years. But I will say, if you're going to paint your models, and I really do think you should, buy decent paints if you can.
Yes.
Craft paints. The first minis I painted, I used like apple barrel craft paints from Walmart. They're fine if you were on a very tight budget. If all your money went to models and you don't have any money left for decent paints, craft paints are fine. There are people who have done YouTube videos of like, hey, let's see what we can paint with craft paints. And it'll be fine. They are not the best as far as pigmentation or consistent thickness.
Yeah.
They're a little bit of a mess to work with. But if you're on a tight budget, they're totally, or if it's just what you have on hand, it's fine. As far as paints to recommend, I'm going to kind of go in like 3 tiers. First is GW paints. Now, GW paints are not bad. The Citadel paint line is not bad. It is inconsistent. Not every color is going to have, again, the same consistency, even among like the different, like they have base paints, which tend to be thicker and more pigmented, and then layer paints, which are a little bit thinner and have a little less pigmentation, just because they want you to build up layers like that. Not all of those even are consistently thick in those layers. Also, their paint pots are the worst designed in the business.
They are really bad. The other thing I'll say too is
waste a lot of paint that way.
Their contrast paints also are wildly inconsistent, because like contrast paints are meant to be the fast version where basically you base coat something in a light color and then you hit it with like one thick coat. It's kind of the joke of like paint. You just hit it with one coat and it's highly pigmented and will stain kind of like the thing and like make it look the color it looks. The problem there is that like some of their contrast paints are amazing, fantastic, great coverage, brilliant, high detail, look awesome. And then some of them like just don't function the same way. So there's a wide range and variety of how vibrant those colors are. And some of that's just going to be trial and error testing. You can find videos and tutorials online. Most hobby stores that I've found have the little like base test where next to the paint rack, they have the texture GW bases where they have primed them all the same color, or they've primed them a set of different colors. So like white, gray, off-white, etc., and then hit it with just the contrast colors, and you can clearly see what the base coat, what the priming coat, how it impacts the color, and which ones have best pigmentation, most vibrancy, most transparency, things like that. So there are resources out there, but the GW paint range, more than any other paint range that I found, has the widest range of how they operate and how they function.
Yeah, there's definitely some GW colors and shades and things like that I go back to regularly because I do really like them. And then there's some colors where like, I never want to touch that color again. It's a pain in the ass to deal with. So, so yeah, so it is very inconsistent, but they do have a very wide range of colors, and all your official paint guides are going to use those colors, so, they're not a bad reference point. The price for paint is okay. You can do a little bit better in some places. Moving up a level, I would say Army Painter and Vallejo and probably Army Painter a little bit over Vallejo.
Yeah.
Vallejo makes a ton of colors. They also have a lot of stuff that's geared more towards like historical paints.
A lot of matte colors.
A lot of
real
matte
world
colors. Yeah. Stuff that's not quite as intense. They do have a game color line that matches a lot of Games Workshop's old color line, and they're the ones that do express paints, I think, as far as like their contrast paints, which I've heard mixed reviews on the express paints.
I don't like their express paints as much as contrast or speed paints, but they're fine.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll say too is like we mentioned that like the GW paints are what all of the like official tutorials and stuff are going to be in. You can find conversion charts online for every single one of these paint lines to be like, when they say ball red, this or this or this or this is the equivalent or the closest match from this line. So
yeah,
don't let like if you're trying to follow tutorials, don't let that necessarily stop you. You can find translations to find those same colors in other lines as needed.
Right. Army Painter, they're probably the biggest direct competitor to Games Workshop as far as paints right now. They actually retired. I think they just did a video where they gave their old paint line a Viking funeral, like setting it on fire. But they have replaced their Warhammer line, I believe, with the Fanatic line now. And they make speed paints, which are probably the biggest competitor for contrast paints. It took them a while to get the formulation quite right, because the first batch of speed paints tended to reactivate if they got wet, which is not great.
When you buy speed paints, make sure that you buy the ones that are labeled Speed Paint 2.0, because those are the ones that don't reactivate. Speed paints is my favorite line of paints right now. The most variety of colors. They have speed paint metallics, which I use even if I'm not using speed paints. Like their metallic speed paints are just fantastic. They just came out with a speed paint marker line, which I picked up like the starter set. So it's literally just like a marker pen that you can use to paint on the speed paints, and it's fantastic. Yeah, the speed paint line, like, it's so good. I cannot say enough good things about it. There's still individual paints within the contrast line that I think are better, that I like more, but overall, their speed paint line is the best for slap chop, fast painting, and just a wide variety. And then I've not used the Fanatics line specifically, but every online creator that I know that uses, that is like a good online painter, has said nothing but great things about the Fanatics line. So I do want to try it at some point. I just haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, I have heard nothing bad about the Fanatics line. Then the last tier up, I will say this is where my paints of choice come in. Two Thin Coats, which is a
Yes.
brand started by Duncan Rhodes, who used to be a painter for Games Workshop. In fact, the whole Two Thin Coats thing was kind of a running joke with him, so he
Yeah.
decided when he went independent to make that his brand, which is also why the contrast paints being one thick coat was, a joke, and he was with the company at the time, so it was just
Yeah.
kind of a play there. But the Two Thin Coats paints, there are conversion charts for comparing this to other paint lines, and those paints are consistently
Yeah.
solid. They're consistent thickness, and like the consistency is standard throughout. The pigmentation is good. They blend well. They thin well. They're fantastic. They are more expensive per ounce than Games
Yeah.
Workshop paints, but I feel like they are worth it. And except for the Games Workshop paints, all these paints that we mentioned are in dropper bottles, which means your individual paints last longer because they don't get exposed to air as much. They don't dry up in the lid. They're just generally better. Also, Pro Acryl makes some absolutely fantastic high pigmentation paint. They
Yeah.
have the best white on the market. Their titanium white is the best white, probably hands down.
Yep.
But Pro Acryl also more expensive. Like Two Thin Coats and Pro Acryl are going to be more expensive paints. So if you're on a budget, but not like a craft paint budget, Games Workshop is fine, but Army Painter is in a similar range and is
Yeah.
better, I think. But Two Thin Coats is my go-to.
Yeah, I think the Army Painter paints are technically cheaper. There are smaller bottles. So like if you're just looking at and you're going to get about the same out of them because you're going to lose less to waste. So I would go with Army Painter. Like I think if it's available, I think that is the best line. But Pro Acryl is more expensive, but they're bigger bottles. So I don't know that I haven't sat down and done like the cost per ounce, but like I would not be surprised if their cost per ounce is similar to what GW or Army Painter is. So like be aware you might be paying more, but you're getting more paint. So
yeah. I will say their paints are, like I said, they're far more pigmented. Like they have stronger pigmentation. So like depending on what effect, if you're wanting to do more subtle effects, Pro Acryl is a little bit harder to use in that effect. But they're a very good paint line. There's a few colors where I have like there's no good equivalent or no equivalent that's quite as strong even in any of the lines. So Pro Acryl is still a very solid paint brand. And you don't have to be married to one particular paint brand. All these paints will work together.
And one thing I'll say as well here that I just realized as I'm kind of thinking about this, these are all acrylic paints. So these are all water-based. You thin them with water. They're relatively easy to clean up. You can do enamel paints for like model airplanes and stuff like that. That gets into a whole other thing because you have to use like spirits to clean them up and special thinners and things like that. So in my opinion, I would stay away from things like oil paints or enamel paints as you start and just go with the acrylics.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other options out there. If you're somebody who comes from, model building or something like that, or somebody that comes from the art world, you might be perfectly comfortable using oil paints, and you can use oil paints to paint miniatures too. That's a perfectly fine way to do this. If you're coming in completely cold, I would recommend acrylics because you're going to just there's a lot of other issues that you have to learn as well.
Yeah. So it's starting with something just simple and water-based.
Yeah.
Easy cleanup, no fumes to deal with. It's just way easier to work with. But yeah, that is basically like if from soup to nuts, from starting from I have heard about 40K and I don't know much about it to I have played games and painted miniatures. That is kind of a rough guide on how to get from point A to point Z.
I will say as well, if you have questions, if there's stuff that we touched on but we didn't go into enough detail and you have further questions, if you're a Patreon, hit us up on Discord, hit us up on there. We have like our Facebook page, we have a Blue Sky account, our information to send us emails is in the show as well. So please reach out, ask us what questions you have. We are more than happy to answer them. We used to do mailbag episodes more frequently, but we've been hit with release wave after release wave for the last years. That may be something we do going forward. Maybe we do more mailbag episodes if we get more questions. So if there's specific things that you want us to dive into more deeply, please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we are here. One of our missions since we started was to kind of help support like new players and help
Yeah.
get people into the game and grow the hobby. And so, yeah, if you have questions about stuff, please ask. There are plenty of ways to
Yes.
get to us, and we are more than happy to answer. And yeah, I mentioned earlier in the episode that like we didn't do a faction breakdown in this. We are going to do a faction breakdown series starting after Kevin and Dennis get back from Atlanta. So look for uh, end of like kind of starting at late November, early December, going into the new year. We will break down every faction in the game, although we'll do them in clusters of groups like based on faction. So
Yeah.
I think we're going to probably start off with Space Marines. We'll look at all the Imperium factions, look at all the Chaos factions, all the Xenos factions, give them about 10, 15 minutes apiece to kind of give you a feel of a little bit of lore, a little bit of rules, a little bit of how they feel on the table, kind of just get you up to speed on how these factions play so that if you are interested in getting in or you are looking at a new faction, you're like, okay, so what is going on with this faction? What do I need to know about them? We're going to try to hit all the high points in over the next couple of months.
Yep.
But until then, our next episode is going to be coverage from the Grand Narrative. I'm looking forward to hearing how that goes, especially with both of you playing Space Dwarves. I think with us being attached to Pickaxe and thus the Yogs cast now, you are legally required to sing Diggy Diggy Hole every game.
Nah, I
I
don't
need
think
to
so.
check the contract. I need to check the
I don't
contract
think
on
so.
that, but there may be a requirement. But no, that will be our next episode is your guys' coverage from the Grand Narrative. So that's always a fun one. Dennis has gone the last couple of years or last 3 years. I think you've gone the last two, or did you
No,
guys
no,
go together?
we've gone. This is the third year that both of us have gone because we missed the first. This is the third year. This will be the fourth year of the Grand Narrative. The third year in Atlanta that we've both gone. We missed year one in New Mexico, and it was kind of a whole different thing. This one's a much different vibe. It's paired up with the World Championships, so there's the World Championships and all of that events that are going on, and then 300 plus people doing narrative stuff, and it's gotten more intricate, more exciting, bigger, better every year. This is the first time that Dennis and I have been on the same faction. So previously in previous years I've been on Chaos, he's been Votan. So this year we're both in the Leagues of Votan battle group, so we'll be together like more frequently throughout the day. There's a whole subgroup of Votan players with us, so like we'll have. I'm interested to see how this changes the experience being in the same faction and like what we noticed from like watching the same things as opposed to having different perspectives on it. So yeah, this will be exciting. And my Votan army is 99% done. I still have to finish basing, but all the paint's done. I have to seal and base and then finish up the cosplay stuff. So pushing it towards the final week as I leave on Thursday morning, but we'll get it done.
That's how you've always done it though. Push it towards the very end. That's your
Yeah,
your
but I'm
best
not supposed to
inspiration for your best inspiration for finishing a project is having it due the next day.
Yeah, but I don't like that because it's a lot of stress.
Yeah, well, that is true. That is true.
I don't like doing that, but that's what I do.
That's what you do. But yeah, we'll be back with that next episode, and then following that, we'll have our faction breakdowns. So until then, from all of us here at Preferred Enemies, I'm your host Rob.
And Kevin.
Good night, good gaming, and yeah, get started in 40K. It's actually a really good time.